Hi there, and welcome back to Ukes of Alex. This is the ukulele podcast where we examine tone woods and strings and cases, accessories, ukuleles, and we try and absorb as much of the ukulele culture from around the world that we can along the way. And my guest today is somebody that I've really admired for 9 years now. Ever since the first time I met him, and we talked about strings and we talked about 8-string ukuleles. My guest today is Master Luthier at Kanile'a Ukuleles. It's Joe Souza. How you doing, Joe?
Doing great, Alex. Hello, everybody. Joe Souza here, all the way from Kaneohe here on the island of Oahu. If I look just out to my left, I'm looking at the Ko'olau mountain range, which of course graces the east side of the island. And if I were to look out towards the right, a little bit past the wall here, we'll be looking right at what we call Mokoli'i, or some people know it as Chinaman's Hat. So giving you a little geographical location on where we are here in Kaneohe.
Sounds like paradise.
It is, thank you.
Well, I'm going to talk to you today about some of the new ukuleles for 2021 that you guys did a very elaborate launch in December for these ukuleles, and people seem really excited about them. I've actually just received our first delivery of the D-Series this week.
Wow.
So I was really delighted when you guys said that you could do this interview. So I guess the first question I've got for you, if you don't mind, is going from a 21-year-old man as an apprentice, learning your craft, how does it feel exactly 30 years later when you're stood there with your youngest son and you've designed a ukulele together and you're showing it off to the world for the first time from just a fantastic factory? What led you to this point, if you can answer that? And how does it feel to be there?
And that's a heartfelt question, really. I understand that this is like a special moment, when we look at father son and the things that we're doing. But I think even beyond that, where the passions start, and in this case, I really believe that the passion for kahiao is as a player, which is really where it was for me too. Now, I'm not going to say I was ever in the same realm of a player that he is, because he's far more advanced, and he's been putting a lot more years to it, too, as far as mastering his technique and playing and kind of understanding tone. And for me, it was more just hey, it's pretty cool. I play ukulele, the chicks dig it, and that was my extent of playing ukulele, and singing and doing things like that. Whereas kahiao is really kind of bitten into more the technique and kind of the the theory behind chord structure and all that kind of stuff, which that's why I say he's far more advanced than I ever was. But bringing that passion from a player's point of view now into how do we build these ukuleles, and how we do what we do to really create the ukulele that we would want to play, and or we would want to hear when you're coming from the tone aspect. So and tone is like taste, right? I like a certain flavor, I don't like a certain flavor. I don't like spicy, but I like sweet. Or I like volume, but I also want sustain. Where do we find the balance in what we kind of associate sound as? And when we look at putting together our heads in this case, and he's going to rely on me a lot because of my experience, yes, but for tone and really kind of dialing everything in, I really rely on him.
Yeah.
So we're like two little school kids, right? Putting on the strings and tuning it up and all that kind of stuff. But when we finally hear the voice of the instrument and then start to understand, wow, when we did this and this to the bracing, this is the result we got. Or when we did this, this, and this to the soundboard, these are the results that we got. And it's where we can really compare them to say, almost like A, B, C. In this case, for the Platinum, we went through a bunch of different prototypes. And even for the D-Series, we went through different prototyping to really kind of dial it in. For example, like the redwood, the Sinker redwood. The story behind the wood is amazing. These are beautiful logs that have, they're old growth, things that we today rarely see, but they were so dense and so heavy that they literally sank to the bottom of the Columbia River, and basically seasoned there for, they're estimating some of these could be over 100 years old of just kind of sitting there in that kind of frigid water, and repurposing them now, going back and kind of and harvesting them in a unique way to repurpose them to become a musical instrument, because they bring such a different tone or a different structure as far as the wood grain to enhance the tone. And when we first played around with that wood, it was like, okay, what is it going to sound like, and then we go ahead and string up the instrument and play the instrument. It's like, wow, it's so rich and so full of tone, volume, projection, warmth, and everything that we're looking for. And those were all like the cornerstones that led up to really creating that series and saying, this wood is so special, and when we combine it with a coil back inside, they really marry beautifully to create this very unique tone. So those are like the again, that father-son moment, which I think I have with all of our sons. I mean, with Kaimana and what he's doing, and Kepa and what he's doing, there's those moments where it's like, that is so cool, to see what the next generation is doing with the knowledge that we have today, and how we're able to really embrace everything that we have today, moving us forward.
Yeah, I did interview Kaimana last year, I think late summer, and just his passion and kind of how proud he is of the various members of your family for their roles. And he was so animated explaining to me, what your Kepa does and what he's good at. And I think the fact that, we are all different, it's so wonderful to see that a family can all have their own piece of the puzzle and all bring it to the table. And yeah, just this transition that you guys are going through, I'm absolutely kind of on board for it. On a personal note, I just find it very inspiring. I've done a lot of factory tours in my time. I've been to like the Martin factory, the Fender factory, and the Martin factory has that family thing, but there's nobody out there from that family on the production line or learning or trying to really do anything on a hands-on basis to innovate. So seeing you guys do that every year, I think the platinum things, I hope you'd agree, has been one of the best things you've ever done in terms of bringing new ideas forward.
It is. And, the whole platinum concept was, if they cage Joe in, at some point, I'm going to go stir crazy. So the platinum was really the avenue to say, hey, from a builder's point of view, create and embrace what you love to do, find that passion in creation. And really, it doesn't fall short of that at all. It's all about being innovative and looking at ways on how we build and what we build and how to create something that, in many ways, they're uncharted waters, right? These are things that has never been done on an ukulele in the history of ukulele. I'm not saying we've been luthiers for thousands of years, but at least for the life that the ukulele has, to do those types of unique steps, to really look at when you play the instrument, how it enhances your playing, and how it enhances even the audience, and what they hear, because most of the time we're playing at home and we're jamming and we're doing our favorite song, and it's not often that we're playing in front of people, but it's not uncommon where we get together at the ukulele club, or even an online jam session, as the new world has kind of presented these, where you just go and play and you have fun. And now people are sharing in different ways where they do have an audience, and wherever that audience may be, it may even be just family sitting around and singing Christmas carols or whatever it may be. We want to be able to do what we do in such a special way. So for example, like this platinum is unbelievable, the response that we've gotten. Literally, this is the first platinum that we're back ordered which is a good thing, from a builder's point of view. But that just shows that the steps that we did and the literally hundreds and hundreds of hours of research and development that we put into these new components have really had that ripple effect that we were looking for. And when we look 100 years from now and saying, the standards that we're setting now and the things that we're doing on our instrument now has become the industry standard. Something that people say, when you play an ukulele, these are the things that an ukulele needs to have in order for it to really be the best ukulele. So, seeing that and kind of, recognizing the fact that the work that we're doing, and really at the end of the day, the joy that we're bringing to people's lives in this crazy time is making a difference. It's making a difference in their life and making a difference in the world.
That's a fantastic way to look at it. And that's how it feels selling instruments as well at our base here. Just the amount of times I've had conversations with people and the inspiration, and people buy into stories as well. So I think the platinum this year is particularly intriguing. The beveled, I want to say, like, it's not a beveled edge, is it? The bevel portion of the top, whose idea was that? And implementing that, how difficult was it?
We call it true relief, because
Okay.
we're on our true bracing and the TRU component that's part of Kanile'a. So we call it a true relief. And really, the whole concept came from Kahiao. When we were looking at creating the platinum, I was looking at ways of adding comfort to the player, adding a way of interacting with the instrument in a better way. So one of the concepts was to do what is called like a wedge, where literally the lower bout, or what is the bass and treble side of the instrument, have different angles. So the bass or upper side was narrower and the treble or lower side of the instrument was wider. And they call it a wedge in the guitar world. And Kahiao said, because besides playing ukulele, he's also stepped into guitar and into other instruments too. And he goes, my electric guitar has this relief that's literally like carved out of the body. And is it something that we can do? And I'm like, yeah, we can do that. Let's figure this out. So, taking that kind of concept idea, say on paper, to now creating the jigs and the fixtures, because here's a side Luthery joke, how many ukulele builders will it take to change a light bulb? And the answer is, well, just one. But you got to build a jig first. Everything is about jigs, and getting an accurate result. So when we started to step into this true relief, we started to really look at the jigs and the fixtures and the steps. And yes, there's a certain degree of repeatability that the jig provides, but more importantly is the accuracy. That's what we're looking for, is to get a consistent result in our bend, a consistent result in the profile of the sides. And some of that is in jigs and fixtures and how we cut the wood. And then some of it also kind of converts a little bit electronically, because we start looking at what happens on the laser and on the CNC routers, and looking at marrying the two, because there's really a lot going on just to create that. And the final on the instrument, you can see it's like, oh, okay, cool, especially from a picture. But then when you get it into your arms, it's like, whoa, this is like life-changing, from a player's point of view, because it literally just kind of takes that edge off of the instrument. It doesn't make your strumming arm or that right hand, to say, for a right-handed player, uncomfortable, which kind of brings up a little side note. Kahiao's like, well, Dad, could we do this left-handed? And I said, absolutely. We create the jigs and all of the components to basically be able to make it for a left-handed player. Alex. So, just saying that these are the things that we have to consider, right, when we're building the instrument, which honestly is all part of the creating fun, the collaborative fun, the things that, can keep you up at night, in a good way, you know,
Yeah.
and coming in the morning and saying, oh, let's do this, this, and this. And then ultimately, of course, prototyping and building a prototype, which is so important because it's really starting to put together what work we've done and, of course, the result that we're able to create through those work or through the steps that we work.
Can you remember roughly how early, well, how late into last year you started working on the Platinum for this year?
Ooh, history has proven that we get started early. So I'm not going to let the cat out of the bag, but we're already, talking about 2022, because there's so much involved with it. Whether we start to, especially when we're doing something as, as exciting, and doing a reflection back as the 2021 Platinum, where we're doing something that, again, nobody has ever done. So we have to be able to, carve the time aside to be able to really put our effort. So to really answer your question, it wasn't January 1st,
Yeah, yeah.
2020, but it was, early on in the year where we started to look at, usually it's, after NAMM and after our different trade shows or different festivals that usually happen kind of early on in the year, that we really start to bite into what the next Platinum or what the new year is going to offer. So it's a process, as always. We don't wait until October to say, okay, well, let's sit down at the chalkboard and figure this out. It starts early enough in the year that gives us the space that we need to be creative, and so that we're not like put into a position where we have to rush things along, but more so just be creative and be able to put energy towards that. And oddly enough, it ends up being mostly at the end of the day, because the Monday through Friday, what we do every day, day in and day out, really the meat and potatoes of what we do here at Kanile'a still requires our focus. It's when we have that afternoon where we can put aside 2 or 3 hours and not necessarily get pulled in different directions, but really be able to focus on, okay, how is this jig going to function?
That's the hardest part. I think in any business or in any kind of creative situation, it's finding the time to not be distracted by the things that have already got you into the position you're in, so that you have the joy of creating more creative things. There's kind of this paradox. And yeah, I think so many people I speak to on this podcast and in basically, in general life, you want to be able to set the time aside so that you can relax and be inspired, but it's not necessarily always that you're dragged in so many directions that inspiration does not come. It's like being a songwriter. You can be a constipated songwriter waiting for it to happen,
Exactly.
If you don't mind me asking, I just want to talk a little bit about the D-Series, because as I say, these have just arrived with us, and I'm going to be showing people proper close-ups of these and doing some sound samples. But I just wanted to ask you, this is based, this is clearly the next evolutionary step of last year's Platinum model. The bracing inside, that angle that you have created, and the actual bracing, the true R bracing, all of the touch relief incarnations over the years. What led you to try that in the first place, and at what points in time have you felt to develop them to the point where it's as it is now?
It's a great question, because certain components of the 2020 Platinum, and then of course leading on to our D-Series where we are today, was basically, from a player's point of view, looking at ways of kind of opening up the soundboard. And I know this sounds kind of funny, and it's not the first time that I visited it. I visited this, oh man, probably back in 98, 99. I built at the time what we call a double puka, puka being hole for Hawaiian, where there was 2 sound holes kind of up in the upper bout, bass and treble bout, closer towards the fingerboard. And the idea at the time was to open up the middle where typically the sound hole would be, open up that area of the soundboard to, help create resonance, help to free up that area in the soundboard to vibrate. So when we went kind of back to the drawing board to say, and the whole concept of the D-Series really kind of sat in my electronic workbench for a while. And when we revisited it in the creation of the 2020 Platinum, it was, okay, what is our goal? Free up some of that center and treble side of the instrument, especially with a wider lower bout in general, with whether our traditional tenor or super tenor, which of course has a wider lower bout than the industry standard. We were looking at ways on how to free up the soundboard more, and so we go and create this. We build the prototype, of course, get some feedback on the prototype, and interestingly enough, once we were really satisfied with where we're going as far as the true bracing and redesigning everything, and then of course releasing it. One of our dealers goes and points out and goes, "Hey, did you ever take a look at Garrison guitars?" I was like, "Oh, yeah." "Had you ever looked at McPherson guitars?" I was like, "Yeah, I have. I've admired them in many different ways." And they're like, "That sound hole is sure reminiscent of what they're doing." And it didn't even dawn on me,
Right.
from a creative point of view. I didn't, as far as I know, subconsciously think that I was copying or mimicking, more so just looking at how to create it, and how to, have the sound hole kind of follow the edge of the waist of the instrument and move it over to basically free up the middle of the soundboard. And of course, the product of the instrument, the product of our thought was, hey, here we are freeing up the soundboard. Here we are getting an instrument that actually sounds way different than a traditional sound hole.
Definitely.
And not realizing that at some point, McPherson and the other builders, to say, were kind of in the same thought, on how they're going to do it to ultimately kind of result to that as their work, and not even really being, in some ways, not even being in the same island or same country or even same part of the world in some cases, where this design of moving the sound hole and opening up the soundboard really kind of translated to. And ultimately, again, when we start to look at things that are going to be in some ways measured in the future, they're going to be like, this was not an industry standard, but now it kind of is, and now it's not just an industry standard, but it's the way that an instrument needs to be or should be. And allowing those creative juices to flow, and more importantly, allowing that instrument to become something that is really the byproduct of all this real thought and creativity, to then now being this functioning instrument. Which, on a side note, that kind of brings back the fact where, at the end of the day, even if it's a creative day or a creative afternoon, and I go home, believe it or not, I'm playing ukulele. That's really where the passion is just going home, strumming, playing my favorite song, putting together a new riff, or, just kind of being with the instrument. Even though we've been building and playing and designing all day long, there's just something about that, going home and kind of fulfilling that need as far as a musician, and really what the ukulele does for you as a player, and nourishes you, in such a unique way.
Yeah. Well, you've touched on the three. I have three other questions that I really wanted to ask you while I had the opportunity, and you've touched on all of them in some way. The first one is, you say you go home and play the ukulele, and I've always associated the 8-string ukulele with you. And I
Nice.
know that you're a very, very well-known falsetto singer. Is that right?
Yes.
Falsetto champion. You're like
Yeah.
like an award-winning falsetto singer. You know, uh, that's I like that you have you've got very, very specific things that you're drawn to in the musical world. Like what led you to the eight string? Because it's an uncommon choice, but plenty of people out there would be very excited to know that. So what led you there?
Well, as a rhythm player, primarily when I first stepped into the ukulele, um, the influences on this young ukulele player, primarily, especially from a vocalist point of view, where the ukulele is an accompanying instrument. And I want to say for many of us, that's where the ukulele really fits in, where we can play and sing and have fun that way. And my mom, who was a twin, my mom played a six string for years and years and years, and that was her axe. That was her instrument of choice.
Very
And my
cool.
mom's twin sister, who also played ukulele, she played primarily an eight string. So when I first stepped into ukulele, of course, I grabbed my mom's ukulele and I was playing her six string because that's the instrument that we had kind of around the house. And of course, eventually I built her a six string, knowing that that's what she loved. But then I always was intrigued by the eight string, and my aunt would be playing her eight string everywhere she goes, and I would play it and strum it, and never really got into it. So finally, I built an eight string and started playing it, and I was like, with the octaves on the fourth course and the third
Yeah.
course, and the unison strings in the second and first course position. It allowed me to pick when I wanted to pick, but it also gave a richness with those octaves that when I dug in and I was playing, that it supported me as far as the vocal side.
Yeah.
And to this day, I still love playing a multi-string. And although the boys kind of surprised me on my birthday, they went and Kaimana headed the project, which is they went and built me a five-string super tenor 19-inch. And it was a surprise. And in fact, the surprise was right on track. I had no idea this was happening. And, I walked into final assembly, and there on the workbench was this beautiful five-string super tenor. I looked, I was like, wow, it's a beautiful ukulele.
Yeah.
But, I didn't put the pieces together other than it was a beautiful instrument. And it was later when Kaimana called me, and I came from my desk to assembly, and I walked through our milling department. I was like, geez, where is everybody? It's not break. It's like something's not right. And then I walk into assembly, and the whole crew is there. And they were there to present me this brand new ukulele that they had designed, created, and built for me for my birthday. And I was a mess. I couldn't play. I couldn't sing. I was, trying to keep my composure, and it was just so special. And that instrument is very special, no doubt about it. And I love playing the 19-inch. I love the string tension to say, and I know that for some ukulele players, even for the eight string, it's not necessarily the easiest instrument to tune and to play. But as you get comfortable with the instrument and you start to recognize what kind of tone, a multi-string instrument is bringing to you from a player and from a vocalist, it's like unbelievable how it can support you in such a unique way.
Yeah, wow. Yeah, I've got a lovely story about that five string. You've actually gone straight into one of my other questions, which is with your baritones, you use a 19-inch scale, and you're pretty much the only person out there using that. Although there are some kind of early baritone examples with that scale length. It never caught on like the kind of 20.75-inch scale. And this is a very nerdy question, but I find your baritone ukuleles absolutely the easiest baritone ukulele on the planet to play, with just the right string tension, sustain. Now, when did that decision come about? Because obviously you now offer 17 and 19-inch scale tenor instruments as well, which, as you've just said.
Yeah, and I think from a builder's point of view, and I'm not taking away the simplicity of the scale length, but kind of enhancing what we were doing already. And when we start to really look and understand at the scale lengths and really and how it's going to affect the player, how is it going to feel on their left hand? And, I mean, honestly, our baritone is, I wouldn't say that different, but the difference that it does have in comparison to, especially when I was early on in building, what was the industry standard, it made a difference to me, and from a player's point of view, I'm always looking at that interaction of what a player would want and or kind of expect from their instrument. And that includes the strings. And even with our baritones, those are kind of a unique set that we had put together. And although Aquila makes great strings, for me, the baritone strings that we designed for our Kanile'a is perfect for our instrument. You know what I'm saying?
Definitely.
And
yeah, absolutely.
They're not an industry standard string diameter. And with the phosphor bonds and the things that we did with those strings, what I was really looking at is, the baritone scale length that we build and the playability that it offers and the string tension and ultimately the sound, because that's what it's all about. And really finding the balance and not necessarily just accepting what is, but more so looking at what it can be.
Yeah.
So, the baritone in my case, in our case, I would say it's, for myself especially, is one of the most instruments that we had done so much for as far as our from our K1 model and the uniquenesses that the baritone has. We've done so much R&D in that instrument that most people don't really realize until you play one,
Yeah.
and actually, get a chance to, appreciate the sound that it has and the playability.
I mean, I this morning, for you, it's morning. It's been a long day for me. About 13 hours ago, I was here playing 12 different baritone ukuleles for a comparison video. And I realized it really punctuated the point about being comfortable for the player, because the Kanile'a was the penultimate ukulele that I played. It was the first one. So it was the 11th I played. It was the first one where I played it and I felt that was right, certainly for me as a player. So I think it's not something that necessarily factors into lots of people's cerebral decision when they're buying something, but when they hold it, that's the difference maker. So so my two other questions for you, if you don't mind, relate back to the super tenor. So at what point in time did you develop the super tenor? It's got such an unusual shape, and did it come from your own preference for 8 strings and the bigger sound?
It's interesting, the shape for our super tenor, what is currently our super tenor, that wider lower bout, the whole design and the whole concept really came from my first attempt at building a tipple, 10-string steel string instrument like an ukulele.
Of course it does.
And
that's that shape. Yeah.
Right. And that's kind of where it came from. And eventually, marrying the two in a sense of, originally putting a 17-inch scale and saying, hey, this is a tenor. It's a 12-inch body, from tail block to neck and body joint on a 17-inch scale, very conventional tenor, but different because of the wider lower bout. And when we introduced it, really, so one of the first ones that I actually built that was with a 17-inch scale, and here's another funny side story, was for a gentleman. His name was John Cole, and John has passed, but we had built a relationship from a builder-player's point of view. And we built this back in '99. So here's the funny side story. I went ahead and built him the instrument. I just put on the final top coat. And this is back when I was still doing a nitrocellulose finish. And the original shop, believe it or not, was kind of a lean-to our house. The house was really what was intended to be the garage of the main house, but we were living in what was created to be like a 1-bedroom studio. and that
Right.
was the flat that we lived in. And there was a little lean-to roof made out of corrugated roofing that was the shop. And I finished the top coat. Kristen and I left because we had to go run some errands. I think we went to the store, groceries or something. And then we came back, and while we were gone, it rained. It rained on the instrument because the roof had a leak and the instrument was absolutely ruined. There was a puddle inside the instrument. That's how much it rained. And I was in tears. Kristen was shocked. I couldn't believe it. And literally, that was the first today super tenor that I was building for this gentleman, and his name is John Coe. And I ended up having to rebuild the instrument because it got ruined because of the of getting wet. But the moral of the story is, at that time, with the collaboration between, John was a phenomenal player and an ukulele collector in that too, to the builder, and putting together our minds to really find something that ultimately today we call our super tenor. It was all the way back in '99 when I was building.
It's a long time ago. I mean, that it makes so much sense to me. I never made the association with the tipple, but that bigger body, yeah. Well, there you go. I suppose you'll never forget that first super tenor, will you? That's yeah. I wonder how many years it took you to be able to laugh about that.
I just scratch open the wound. I'll be crying off screen.
Yeah, this afternoon it will come back to you. Well, I've got one more question for you, if you don't mind. Thank you for being such a good sport and talking to me for so long today.
You're welcome.
My question is, for such a forward-thinking company, and clearly you are very open to following your nose when a new idea comes along or a new concept, but obviously drawing influences from the past, are there any builders in particular that influenced you growing up on your journey to the point you're at now? Anybody that you took particular advice or inspiration from that a builder now watching this might take something from?
Growing up, there wasn't a whole bunch of ukulele builders, to be very candid. But the one that probably played the most effect on myself as a builder, and I think it's because he created space to allow me to be creative. His name is Peter Bermudez. And although Uncle Pete has passed, he was a retired Pearl Harbor shipyard employee who had a passion for ukulele as a player and started to build ukuleles in his little home shop. And that's where I bought my first ukulele from Uncle Pete. And that was back in 1990. I bought my first ukulele from Uncle Pete. And, immediately we hit it off. And, he took me under his wing as an apprentice. And again, he created a safe space to say, hey, we can do whatever we want. There's no rules. And in that, he allowed, for example, the first ukulele I ever built with him was a concert body with a tenor neck, what we today call a super concert.
Yeah.
Uncharted waters, never built as far as I know. And here we were really doing R&D on my first instrument, figuring it out. I would say he played one of the biggest effects. Now, when we start to look today kind of as a modern day ukulele company, probably one of the most influential builders that has affected myself and we as Kanile'a, I'll say for sure, is Bob Taylor. And what Taylor has done in the guitar world with Taylor guitars. And, beyond building innovative instruments and just wonderful playing pieces, looking and recognizing the fact that we have to take care of our environment.
Yeah.
And really putting that as a focal point of what we do. And he inspired that through his ebony project that he does in South Africa, and really kind of reshaped the ebony industry. And how they do UV, the UV cured finish, and the impacts on the environment that has, to himself coming to our reforestation project on Hawaii Island and saying, Joe, what you guys are doing is phenomenal. I want to do this too. And putting the steps forward to make that happen too, where now Bob Taylor is planting 500,000 koa trees and saying, I'm committed to the environment just as equally as somebody who's born and raised in Hawaii, and someone who has embraced the Hawaiian culture as part of their life, but more importantly, has really put those practices into place as a company to a poetry for every ukulele we build. So I would say, as a modern day luthier, what they created and what they continue to create, I would say probably played one of the biggest influences on me as a builder.
Well, no, that makes a lot of sense, and it's funny you saying about that first super tenor you built in the nitrocellulose finishes that you used to use, and you had that studio apartment with that annex to build those nitrocellulose fumes. It's a miracle that you and Kristen are still here and healthy if you were building like that. And now you've got this UV gloss technique that's so far removed from the nitrocellulose finish.
Mm-hmm.
It's crazy to see how things can progress in 20, 30 years, isn't it?
It is. And, I'm so excited to look at the future on where we're going to be 20 and 30 years from now, and really what we as Kanile'a and that ripple, again, that we've created is reshaping an industry to really have future builders, the guys who are inspecting my instruments and going, what is he doing on the bracing? How did he do this? And kind of putting the puzzle together and putting that into their instrument and saying, look, this is something that, yes, has been created. Yes, I'm sharing what was, I'm not trying to reinvent the wheel here, but it's creating a better instrument for the player. And at the end of the day, that's what it's about. It's playing the instrument and having that instrument as part of your life,
Yeah, that's very wise words. You've got to be, you're taking the puzzle as far as you can, but there's still pieces to put in, and it's down to the next generation to kind of keep progressing that. But for now, Joe, I must say you're a real hero of mine. Every time I've had a conversation with you, I've learned something, and I don't mind flying to California for 11 hours every year because I get to have a chat with you like this there. And this has been a tonic for me because I didn't get to go and do that this year. So thank you for coming on the podcast. And I really appreciate you coming on, and I'll speak to you soon.
You're very welcome. And thank you for, including us and sharing what we do with, your customers and beyond, because I'm sure there are so many people who are going to tune in who have now found the ukulele as such an integral part of their life. And no matter, what the world is throwing at us and the new normal that is going to develop from this, ultimately, the ukulele can be there for them and can really be their best friend in some of the most challenging days that we've ever really faced, to say, hey, no matter what else is going on, strum my favorite song, play my favorite tune, and the ukulele truly nourishes my soul.
Absolutely. I think we should leave it there. That's beautiful. Thanks for joining me.
You're very welcome, brother. Take care of yourself and stay safe.